Imagine a job so disgusting, so intimate, yet so powerful, that it could make or break empires. Forget knights and kings, the real power in medieval courts was often held by a man whose daily task involved wiping the king's bum. Yes, you heard that right. This wasn't some low-life servant. This was the groom of the stool, a trusted confidant, a gatekeeper of secrets, and a master of royal dignity. What kind of person took on a role so absurd, yet so crucial? And how did a job this bizarre become a direct path to unimaginable power and wealth? Get ready, because the truth about medieval royal hygiene is far weirder and more shocking than you could ever imagine. Let's step into a world where privacy was a luxury and bodily functions, well, they were as public as a jousting match. In medieval Europe, hygiene wasn't the squeaky clean obsession we know today. Castles were drafty, water was dicey, and the idea of a daily shower would have made a knight laugh harder than a court jester. Bodily functions were just life. Kings, queens, peasants, everyone did their business, and no one blushed about it. According to a 2019 article from historyextra.com, medieval folks saw the body as a natural machine, its outputs as unremarkable as a horse's hoofbits. Shame? That was reserved for treason, not toilets. But let's talk about wiping. Today, we grab a roll of triple ply and call it a day. In the Middle Ages, options were creative. A 2021 piece from medievalists.net traces the evolution of wiping materials: straw, leaves, or, if you were fancy, a scrap of linen. The Romans had their tessorium, a sponge on a stick, shared like a communal toothbrush. Grimace all you want, it worked. In China, ceramic shit sticks were the go-to, as noted in a 2020 BBC feature on ancient hygiene. By the time we hit the medieval courts of England, the wealthy had graduated to soft cloths or wool, but the act was still manual, messy, and very, very human. Now, imagine you're a peasant in 1450, trudging through a muddy village. You hear whispers of a courtier who's risen to power not by wielding a sword but by tending to the king's most private moments. You'd laugh. You'd gag. But then you'd realize, this job held the keys to the kingdom. Ever wondered what it truly takes to earn a king's absolute trust? Let's find out. So, who was insane enough to take on this royal duty? Meet Hugh Denies, the man who gambled his dignity for ultimate power. When he stood outside Henry VI's privy chamber for his first day as groom of the stool, he was about to learn that serving a king meant getting intimate in ways most courtiers would never dare. According to David Starkey's Henry, a Virtuous Prince, 2008, the groom of the stool was no mere servant. He was the king's confidant, his shadow, his keeper of secrets. His job? To assist the king during his most vulnerable moments, those trips to the close stool, the medieval equivalent of a portable toilet. Hugh would hand over the linen, ensure the chamber was clean, and, yes, sometimes wipe the royal backside himself. Sounds humiliating, doesn't it? But here's the shocking twist: this was no low-life gig. The groom of the stool was a coveted position, fought over by ambitious courtiers. Why? Because proximity was power. The groom wasn't just cleaning up, he was in the room where it happened, every day, multiple times a day. As Starkey notes, the groom controlled access to the king's privy purse, managed his personal finances, and often became his closest advisor. Think of it, while dukes and earls schemed in the great hall, the groom was whispering in the king's ear, linen in hand. Picture Hugh, nervous but ambitious, learning the ropes. He's 25, sharp-eyed, from a minor noble family. He's heard the snickers from other courtiers, there goes the king's ass wiper. But he knows something they don't. Every moment with the king is a chance to prove his loyalty. One day, as he hands Henry a fresh cloth, the king mutters about a troublesome duke. Hugh listens, nods, says nothing. But he files it away. That's the job, not just wiping, but watching, listening, becoming indispensable. Ever had a friend you'd trust with your deepest secrets? That's what the groom was to the king, but his next move would change everything. Stay tuned to see how his dirty job literally steered history. Let's fast forward to Henry VIII's court, where the groom's role reached its terrifying peak. Enter Sir Henry Norris, a name you might not know, but one who whispered secrets into history. a groom who used his proximity to Henry VIII to shape the court's power dynamics by doing what no one else dared. A 2019 HistoryExtra.com article calls Norris the ultimate insider, a groom who used his proximity to Henry VIII to shape the court's power dynamics. Norris wasn't just wiping bums, he was steering history. How? Because the Privy Chamber was where the real decisions were made. While ambassadors waited in the hall, Norris was there, hearing the king's unfiltered thoughts, his fears, his plans, his grudges. Psychologists tell us physical proximity breeds trust. It's why we confide in those closest to us, why a shared secret feels like a bond. The Tudors knew this instinctively. By letting the groom into his most private moments, the king was saying, "I trust you with my dignity." And in a world where betrayal was a daily risk, that trust was gold. Norris, for instance, controlled who saw the king and when. A 2020 study from the English Historical Review notes that he once delayed a rival's audience just long enough for Henry to cool off, saving a man's career and maybe his head. Now, imagine a scene in 1533. Norris is in the Privy Chamber, the air heavy with the scent of beeswax and, well, you know. Henry's on the close stool, grumbling about Anne Boleyn's latest tantrum. Norris listens, his face neutral, but his mind racing. Later, he passes a subtle hint to a friendly earl, who adjusts his strategy. That's power, not in titles, but in moments. Ever wonder what you'd do to gain a king's ear? Would you wipe a bum for a shot at history? Drop your thoughts in the comments, we read every one. But it wasn't all scheming. There was something human, almost tender, in these moments. Picture Norris, late at night, the king exhausted from a day of ruling. As he hands over the linen, Henry sighs, "You're the only one I can trust, Henry." In that flicker of candlelight, a bond forms, not just lord and servant, but two men navigating a brutal world. It's absurd, it's gross, but it's real. And it changed everything. But as hygiene evolved, the groom's filthy reign began to fade. By the time Elizabeth I took the throne, this bizarre job was facing its end. Could a modern world still value such an intimate, antiquated role? Hygiene was evolving, slowly. According to a 2022 article from History Today, the rise of piped water and private latrines meant kings didn't need as much hands-on help. Elizabeth, ever practical, scaled back the groom's duties. Her privy chamber was less about bums and more about brains. Women, too, played a bigger role in her court, though the groom remained a male position. Imagine Kat Ashley, Elizabeth's trusted lady-in-waiting, watching the old ways fade. She'd seen the grooms of her father's court wield power, but now? The close stool was losing its throne. Let's pause for a story. Picture Joan, a fictional courtier in 1590, reflecting on the groom's decline. She's 40, sharp-witted, and has served Elizabeth for years. One evening, she overhears a young noble joking about the arse-wipers of old. Joan smirks but feels a pang. She remembers her uncle, a groom under Henry VIII, who once told her how he'd calmed the king during a fever, wiping his brow as much as his backside. It wasn't about the act, he'd said. It was about being there. Joan wonders, in a world of newfangled flash valves and private chambers, will loyalty still matter? She hopes so. By the 17th century, the groom's role was ceremonial, a relic of a messier time. James I and Charles I kept the title, but the job was less about linen and more about prestige. As hygiene improved, plumbing, the need for a bum wiper faded. But the principle? That stayed. Loyalty, trust, proximity, they never go out of style. Ever wonder what you'd use to wipe in a medieval castle? Straw? Linen? A spare goblet? Drop your guess below, it's fun to think about. Picture this, it's dawn in 1510, and Sir William Compton, groom of the Stool to Henry VIII, is already awake. His chamber is small but cozy, a flicker of candlelight dancing on the walls. His day isn't about grand banquets or battlefield heroics, it's about precision, loyalty, and yes, a stack of fresh linens. According to a 2020 article from the English Historical Review, the groom's routine was a masterclass in multitasking. Compton's mornings began with inspecting the close stool, think a velvet cushioned chair with a chamber pot hidden beneath. He'd ensure it was spotless, the linen soft, the water basin filled. Cleanliness wasn't just courtesy, it was a matter of royal pride. But the job wasn't all about hygiene. Compton was the king's gatekeeper. He'd stand by as Henry VIII shuffled in, bleary-eyed from last night's feast, ready to do his business. While handing over a cloth, Compton might hear a grumble about a French ambassador or a jest about a courtier's bad dancing. These moments, as noted in David Starkey's Henry, Virtuous Prince, 2008, were when the groom's real work began, listening, nodding, storing every word. By noon, he'd be coordinating the king's schedule, deciding who got a private audience and who waited in the cold. Ever had a job where you juggled a dozen tasks while keeping a smile? That was Compton's life, only with higher stakes and worse smells. Let's imagine a moment. It's mid-afternoon, and Henry's in a foul mood, his leg ulcers acting up. Compton, calm as ever, kneels to adjust the close stool's cushion. The king mutters, "William, these lords think they know better than me." Compton doesn't flinch. He hands over the linen, murmurs something soothing, and later slips a word to a trusted ally to ease the tension. That's the groom's art, turning a king's vulnerability into a quiet victory. What's the toughest job you've ever had to smile through? Share it in the comments, we're dying to know. Now, let's step into the great hall, where the air buzzes with gossip and the clink of goblets. The groom of the stool might have been the king's right-hand man, but to the rest of the court? He was a walking punchline. A 2019 HistoryExtra.com piece quotes a courtier's snide remark about the king's arsewiper being closer to the throne than any general. The title was prestigious, sure, but it came with a side of smirks. Courtiers envied the groom's access but couldn't resist a jab. Better a sword than a cloth, one might whisper, only to watch the groom stroll past with the king's ear and a fatter purse. Imagine young Margaret, a fictional courtier in 1520, watching Sir Henry Norris glide through the hall. She's 19, ambitious, and a little in awe. She's heard the jokes, how Norris polishes more than the king's boots, but she sees the truth. Norris nods to dukes who bow back. He carries no sword, yet his word could shift a lord's fate. Margaret wonders, is the laughter worth the power? One night, she overhears a drunken earl mocking Norris at a banquet. Norris smiles, unruffled, and later ensures that Earl's petition gets lost. Margaret learns a lesson. In the court, dignity is a small price to pay for influence. This tension fascinated medieval society. Psychologists note that humans often use humor to cope with discomfort. Here, the discomfort of a job both revered and ridiculed. The groom's role forced the court to confront their own contradictions. They craved the king's trust but recoiled at its cost. Ever been laughed at for something you're secretly proud of? That's the groom's life in a nutshell. Drop a story in the comments about a time you turned a joke into a win. It's the medieval way. Being the groom of the stool wasn't just about wiping and whispering, it was a high-stakes gamble. The rewards? Immense. A 2021 BBC History magazine article notes that grooms like Sir Henry Norris amassed wealth, lands, and titles. Norris, for instance, gained a knighthood and control over key royal funds, all because he was the man Henry VIII trusted most. But the risks? Just as steep. Proximity to the king meant walking a tightrope. One wrong word, one misstep, and you could fall hard. In 1536, Norris himself learned this the hard way, caught up in Anne Boleyn's downfall and executed for alleged treason. Trust was a double-edged sword. Let's paint a scene. It's 1515, and Thomas, a fictional groom, is sweating in the privy chamber. He's 30, loyal to a fault, but nervous. Last week, he overheard Henry VIII rant about a rival's plot. Thomas passed the tip to a friendly lord, hoping to curry favor. Now, the king's asking pointed questions. Who've you spoken to, Thomas? Henry's voice is calm, but his eyes are sharp. Thomas's heart pounds. He mumbles an answer, praying it's enough. Later, Henry claps his shoulder, but Thomas knows, one slip, and he's done. That's the groom's life, power within reach, peril a breath away. Why take the risk? Because the rewards weren't just gold, they were legacy. Grooms like Hugh Denise left their families richer, their names etched in history. Psychologists say humans crave status, even at great cost. For the groom, every linen handed over was a step toward immortality. Ever risked it all for a shot at something bigger? Tell us in the comments, what's the boldest gamble you've taken? For the grooms, it was all or nothing, every single day. So, what's the enduring legacy of the groom of the stool? It's not just a quirky footnote in history books. It's a shocking reminder that power often hides in the humblest, most uncomfortable places. The groom wasn't a knight or a bishop, but he held the king's trust in his hands, literally. A 2023 piece from BBC History magazine argues that the groom's role shaped modern notions of service. Think of today's personal assistants, the ones who know every detail of a CEO's life. They're not wiping bums, but they're still gatekeepers, confidants, the ones who make things happen. Let's end with a peasant's perspective. Imagine Tom, a farmer in 1500, hearing about Sir William Compton, Henry VIII's groom. Tom's life is mud and toil, but he dreams of the court, where a man can rise by holding a cloth. He doesn't envy the task, but he gets it, loyalty is everything. One day, he sees Compton ride through the village, resplendent in velvet. Tom wonders what secrets Compton carries, what trust is earned. It's absurd, but it's human. We all want to be needed, don't we? Psychologists say trust is built through shared vulnerability. The groom's job was the ultimate test. If you can handle a king's messiest moments, you can handle his heart. That's what makes this story resonate, even now. We all have someone we'd trust with our secrets, our flaws, our humanity. The groom of the stool was just that, someone who saw the king at his most human and stayed loyal. In a world of TikToks and toilet paper, that's a lesson worth remembering. So, the groom of the stool wasn't just about wiping bums. It was about unimaginable trust, power forged in the most unlikely moments, and bonds that shaped history itself. From Hugh Denise's nervous first day to Sir Henry Norris's deadly influence, this role reminds us that even the most absurd acts can carry the weight of kingdoms. Why did wiping bums matter? Because it was never just about the act, it was about being there, steady and true, when no one else could be. How did it shape politics? By giving one man unmatched, unfiltered access to the king's mind and heart. And who were these grooms? Men who proved that loyalty, not swords, built empires. If this wild tale shocked you, made you think, or even made you cringe, hit that like button, share it with a friend who loves weird history, and tell us in the comments, what's the strangest job you'd take for ultimate power? Or maybe just share who you trust with your darkest secrets. We're all human, after all, medieval or modern, and that's the real story here. Thanks for joining us on this unforgettable ride through history's privy chambers. Until next time, keep your linens clean and your loyalties closer.